Hi everyone, I'm Alex, and I just heard a story that I have to share with you right now. Trust me, you won't believe how it unfolds. Imagine growing up in a family where money is everything, where your own parents and siblings judge you based on the price tag of your clothes and the brand of your car. Now, picture being the disappointment in that family, the one they always looked down on, the one they never took seriously. That was Rachel Walker, a woman constantly overshadowed by her sister's flashy success. But one day, in the middle of an airport, everything changed. A single moment, a shocking truth, and a twist that left her entire family speechless. What happens when the less successful sibling turns out to be the most powerful of them all? Stay with me, because this story will make you rethink what true success really means. Sunday brunch at the Walker family home in Brookline, Massachusetts, was always an extravagant affair. The dining room, adorned with antique silverware and crystal chandeliers, reflected the family's obsession with status and wealth. At the center of it all was Victoria Walker, the eldest daughter, who had built a successful career as a high-end real estate broker. Dressed in a tailored designer dress with a Cartier watch glinting on her wrist, she exuded the polished charm of someone who knew how to navigate Boston's elite circles. Across the table sat Rachel Walker, the younger sister. Unlike Victoria, Rachel had always embraced a simpler lifestyle. A financial advisor at a mid-sized investment firm, she preferred practicality over luxury. Her beige linen dress and heirloom pearl necklace, a gift from their late grandmother, were a stark contrast to Victoria's curated, Instagram-worthy appearance. But in the Walker family, appearances were everything. "Rachel, that dress again?" Victoria sighed dramatically, adjusting her silk scarf. "You know, Brooks Brothers has some great options for professionals. You don't have to dress like you're still in college." Rachel merely smiled, unfazed by the condescending remark. "I'm comfortable, Vic. I don't need flashy clothes to do my job." Their mother, Eleanor Walker, sipped her imported Italian coffee and shot a disapproving glance at Rachel. "Sweetheart, Victoria has a point. Your job may not require expensive fashion, but appearances matter. Look at your sister, she's making $200,000 a year now. That's what success looks like." Rachel took a bite of her croissant, glancing at Victoria's social media feed that was pulled up on their mother's iPad. Post after post showcased first-class flights, five-star dining, and designer shopping sprees. The envious comments from Victoria's followers only fueled her ego. Their father, Richard Walker, a retired executive, nodded approvingly at his eldest daughter. "Speaking of success, Victoria found an incredible resort in Maui for our trip next month. She's handling all the arrangements." Rachel barely reacted, but inside, she knew what was coming. Every family vacation was the same. Victoria took control, and her generosity always came with strings attached. Victoria leaned forward, smiling like a cat playing with its prey. "I've already booked everything. We'll be flying business class, of course. And Rachel, I took care of your ticket too." Rachel nodded, knowing better than to assume she'd be treated equally. Sure enough, when she received her boarding pass, she saw the dreaded words, "Economy class. Middle seat. Last row." Rachel turned to her sister, her expression unreadable. Was this a mistake? Victoria smirked, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Come on, Rach. You're all about saving money. I thought I'd help you out." Their father chuckled. "Victoria is right. You get to the same destination in economy class. It's appropriate for your salary, don't you think?" Rachel's fingers tightened around the flimsy boarding pass, but she didn't give them the reaction they expected. Years in high-stakes finance had taught her the power of patience. She had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals with tougher opponents than her sister. Instead of arguing, she simply smiled. "Thanks, Vic. That was so thoughtful of you," she said, her voice even. The exchange caught the attention of the brunch staff, as well as some guests dining nearby. It was impossible to ignore the contrast, the wealthy designer-clad family versus the modestly dressed, composed younger sister. A few onlookers whispered among themselves. What the Walkers didn't realize was that their attempt to belittle Rachel was about to backfire spectacularly. They thought she was just an ordinary financial advisor. What they didn't know was that she had built a financial empire behind the scenes, one that would soon redefine their understanding of wealth and power. The departure hall of Boston Logan International Airport bustled with the energy of early Saturday travelers. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the polished tile floors and the storefronts of high-end designer boutiques. Luggage carts rolled past, many stacked with Louis Vuitton trunks and sleek Rimowa suitcases, their owners effortlessly exuding wealth and privilege. Amidst the rush, a champagne-colored Range Rover Velar glided smoothly into the private drop-off lane. The driver's door opened first, and Victoria Walker stepped out, lowering her oversized Chanel sunglasses with a practiced ease. She turned to the valet, motioning toward the trunk. "Be careful with those," she said, her tone dripping with superiority as the hotel porter hurried to unload her Gucci garment bags and monogram suitcases. Her husband, James Walker, emerged next, adjusting the cuffs of his custom-tailored blazer, his expression detached as if this entire process was beneath him. Their parents, Eleanor and Richard Walker, arrived moments later in their black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, nodding their approval as they took in their daughter's flawless execution of wealth and status. But where was Rachel? Victoria sighed dramatically, checking her gold Cartier watch, tapping the screen as if a few extra minutes of waiting would ruin her perfectly curated itinerary. Just then, a yellow cab pulled into the general drop-off zone, blending in with the rideshare cars and budget travelers. Rachel stepped out, dressed simply in dark wash jeans, a navy blouse, and a beige trench coat, a stark contrast to her sister's designer ensemble. Over her shoulders, she had draped their grandmother's heirloom shawl, a sentimental piece that had far more value than anything in Victoria's luggage. "Morning, everyone," Rachel greeted with a polite smile, ignoring the judgmental glances from her family. She handed the driver a generous tip before grabbing her suitcase, one that, while not luxury-branded, was practical and well-traveled. Victoria wasted no time in delivering her first blow. "Oh Rach, you really should let me upgrade your travel style. That cab? Honey, Uber Black exists for a reason," she quipped, looping an arm through their mother's as they strode toward the terminal. Rachel's smile remained intact. She had long grown used to Victoria's passive-aggressive comments, but she wasn't here to fight, at least, not yet. Inside, the family approached the priority check-in counter, where airline staff greeted them with polished professionalism. A young attendant in a neatly pressed uniform bowed slightly as she scanned Victoria's itinerary. "Welcome, Ms. Walker. Your reservations are confirmed. We'll check your luggage and process your upgrades now," she said, gesturing toward the business class priority lane. Victoria nodded in satisfaction, taking the moment to turn toward Rachel with a smirk. "Here's your ticket, Rach," she said, handing over the boarding pass with deliberate slowness. Rachel took it and within seconds, saw exactly what had happened. Economy class. Middle seat. Last row. She exhaled through her nose, keeping her expression neutral. She wouldn't give Victoria the satisfaction of a reaction. "Oh, was that a mistake?" Rachel asked, glancing at her sister. Victoria placed a manicured hand on her hip, feigning innocence. "Oh sweetie, I just thought since you're always raving about saving money, you wouldn't mind economy. After all, we're all going to the same place, right?" Their father chuckled. "That's the spirit. You get the same experience in economy, just, without the champagne." Rachel resisted the urge to roll her eyes. It was classic Victoria, her generosity always came with a twist of humiliation. This wasn't just about money. This was a power move, a way to reinforce the idea that Rachel was somehow less than her sister. Eleanor gave an awkward smile, smoothing the pearl necklace around her neck. "Victoria is just trying to be practical, dear. Besides, first class isn't really necessary for someone in your line of work." That one stung. Rachel, however, had mastered the art of patience. Instead of lashing out, she simply tilted her head and smiled, a knowing, almost amused smile that made Victoria's smirk falter ever so slightly. "Thanks for looking out for me, Vic," Rachel said smoothly, slipping the ticket into her bag as if it was nothing more than a receipt. Around them, other passengers had begun to notice. A mother standing nearby whispered something to her teenage daughter. A businessman in a tailored suit glanced over, curiosity flickering in his expression. The contrast between the polished, designer-clad Walker family and the unbothered, modestly dressed sister was impossible to ignore. Victoria had expected Rachel to look embarrassed, to shrink away from the attention, to show some sign of defeat. Instead, she had done the opposite. She had owned the moment with quiet confidence. And that was what irritated Victoria the most. As they moved toward security, Rachel could feel her sister's gaze lingering on her, searching for some sign of weakness that simply wasn't there. Little did Victoria know, this was the last time she would ever be able to look down on Rachel. The hum of activity in the airport terminal was nearly deafening. PA announcements crackled overhead, hurried footsteps echoed against the polished marble floors, and travelers dragged their luggage toward security lines. The Walker family stood in the VIP check-in section, a world away from the chaotic general boarding area. Flight attendants in Navy uniforms moved efficiently, assisting first-class passengers with a carefully rehearsed warmth that came with years of catering to the wealthy elite. Victoria stood at the counter, tapping her manicured nails against the marble surface as she oversaw the check-in process. Her Gucci carry-on was effortlessly placed on the scale, followed by her designer garment bag. She smirked as she handed over her business-class boarding pass, watching Rachel from the corner of her eye. Rachel stood just behind her, her economy-class ticket still folded in her hand. She was used to Victoria's games, but this time, something about the way her sister smirked made it clear, this was meant to be humiliating. Rachel didn't flinch. She wasn't going to give her sister the satisfaction. Instead, she simply tucked the ticket into her coat pocket and moved forward. Just then, a senior flight attendant approached with a polite but urgent expression. Unlike the younger crew members, this woman exuded authority. She wore a gold badge, a mark of distinction in the airline world, one reserved for those who personally handled the airline's most valuable customers. "Miss Walker." The woman addressed Rachel, her tone respectful. Rachel turned, a slight furrow forming between her brows. "Yes." Victoria barely concealed her look of satisfaction, expecting the flight attendant to remind Rachel that she belonged in economy. Their parents, Eleanor and Richard, exchanged a knowing glance, convinced this was just another moment reinforcing Victoria's status. But then, something changed. The flight attendant's posture shifted subtly, her gaze flicking to the screen in front of her before snapping back to Rachel. For a moment she hesitated, then, as if realizing the weight of what she was about to say, she straightened her shoulders. "There's been a change to your reservation," she said, her voice carefully measured. Victoria's smirk widened. "Oh?" she drawled, crossing her arms. "Is there a problem?" The flight attendant ignored her and bowed slightly, directly to Rachel. The gesture was not one of apology, but of respect. "My sincerest apologies, Miss Walker," she continued, her tone crisp and professional. "We were unaware of your status. You have been upgraded to first class, as per your executive privileges." Silence. A stunned stillness settled over the family as the words sank in. Victoria's smirk vanished so fast it might as well have been erased. Their mother's mouth opened slightly, eyes darting between Rachel and the attendant. Their father, Richard, took a sharp breath, his usual golf club arrogance cracking under confusion. "What?" Victoria finally said, her voice tight with disbelief. Rachel remained calm, collected, unreadable. Years in finance had trained her to control her expressions, to never let them see her sweat. "Yes, Miss Walker," the flight attendant confirmed, tapping a few keys on the screen before printing out a new boarding pass. "You are one of our most valued corporate members, and our system reflects your executive board status. Please follow me to the private first-class lounge before boarding." Rachel took the boarding pass with steady fingers. First class. Suite 1A. Victoria's face drained of color. "There must be some mistake," she sputtered. "Rachel doesn't, she isn't." But the flight attendant wasn't listening. She was already motioning for another uniformed staff member to assist with Rachel's luggage. The same level of service Victoria had expected for herself, only now, it was being offered to the sister she had spent years belittling. Rachel finally turned to face Victoria. For the first time in years, she saw true panic behind her sister's perfect exterior. The carefully maintained illusion of superiority was unraveling right in front of them. Rachel tilted her head slightly, studying her sister, before offering the same calm smile she had given at check-in. "Oh Vic," she said softly, voice almost sympathetic. "I would invite you to the lounge, but well," she glanced at Victoria's business class ticket. "You know how exclusive first-class access is." And with that, she turned toward the private lounge, leaving her family standing there in stunned silence. The warm Hawaiian breeze carried the scent of salt and hibiscus as the Walker family entered the VIP lounge at Honolulu International Airport. The space was a world away from the chaos of the main terminal: polished mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the emerald green ocean, and uniformed staff quietly tending to trays of chilled champagne and fresh tropical fruit. Rachel sat comfortably in a private booth by the window, her first-class privileges granting her access to an environment her family had never imagined she would belong to. She had arrived ahead of them, thanks to the priority deboarding reserved for the airline's most elite members. The moment her family stepped inside, their reactions were predictable. Eleanor stiffened, clearly unprepared for the level of luxury surrounding her. Richard, usually composed, rubbed his temples, his expression caught between frustration and disbelief. James Walker, Victoria's husband, remained awkwardly silent, choosing instead to check his phone. And Victoria hadn't spoken a word since the boarding pass incident at Logan Airport. Rachel calmly set her crystal champagne flute down on the table as they approached. "Let's sit," she said simply, motioning toward the leather seats across from her. A waiter immediately appeared, refilling her glass before offering drinks to the rest of the family. Victoria declined with a tight-lipped expression, but Eleanor, still visibly rattled, gratefully accepted. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Victoria finally snapped. "Rachel," she said, her voice low but sharp. "What the hell is going on?" Rachel leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. She could have drawn this out longer, let them squirm, but she had no interest in humiliating them, not the way they had tried to humiliate her. "I figured you'd ask eventually," she said, exhaling as she traced the rim of her glass. "So let me explain." Victoria folded her arms, her manicured nails tapping against her sleeve. "I think you should." Rachel took a moment before answering. "Do you remember during the 2020 airline crisis?" she began, her tone composed. "When the travel industry collapsed and multiple airlines were on the verge of bankruptcy?" Her parents exchanged glances. Even Victoria, for all her arrogance, looked slightly uncertain. Rachel continued. "I was part of the restructuring team," she said. "Not just an advisor, I led the financial recovery strategy for 3 of the country's biggest airline corporations. I was appointed to their executive board after securing the funding that kept them from going under." The room fell silent. Victoria stared at her, the disbelief settling in one slow realization at a time. Eleanor's hand froze on her champagne flute, eyes darting between her daughters. Richard shifted in his seat, leaning forward slightly. "I thought you worked in some small investment firm," Victoria finally said, her voice hollow. Rachel smiled faintly. "I do," she admitted. "But I also sit on 3 corporate boards, handle billion-dollar investment portfolios, and own a penthouse in Back Bay that I've never felt the need to live in." Victoria let out a short, stunned breath, blinking as if she was trying to make sense of the information. "But why?" Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell us?" Rachel looked directly at her mother. "Would you have believed me?" she asked simply. Eleanor looked away, her throat working as if she had no answer. Victoria, however, was still in denial. You let us think you were struggling," she said, her voice tight with accusation. "You let me," she swallowed, suddenly unable to say the words. Rachel raised a brow. "I let you what?" she prompted. Victoria's jaw clenched. "I let you think I was better than you," she admitted, the words falling out like they physically hurt to say. Rachel finally leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "That's the thing, Vic," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You were never better than me. You were just louder." Victoria flinched, and for the first time, Rachel saw something real in her sister's expression. Not arrogance, not entitlement, but actual raw emotion. Eleanor, who had been quiet all this time, finally set her glass down. "We misjudged you," she said quietly. "For years." Rachel exhaled, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. This was the closest thing to an apology she had ever gotten from her mother. "I never needed you to think highly of me," she said. "I just wanted you to treat me like I mattered." Richard nodded slowly, rubbing his jaw as if considering something long overdue. The power dynamics in the Walker family had shifted permanently, and for the first time, Rachel wasn't on the losing side. Victoria's shoulders sagged slightly, the fight in her finally dimming. Then, to Rachel's surprise, her sister laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh, or a cruel one. It was small, breathless, self-deprecating. "I guess I should cancel the resort," Victoria said, shaking her head. "I doubt it's as nice as wherever you were planning to stay." Rachel chuckled, lifting her glass again. "You could say that," she said. "I own a villa here." Victoria blinked. Eleanor let out a tiny gasp. Richard groaned, shaking his head. Then, Victoria laughed again. Well, of course you do, she muttered. Rachel smirked. This time, she said, glancing around the table. Why don't we all stay there? Together. For the first time in years, her family didn't look down on her. And that? That was better than any first-class upgrade. The Back Bay penthouse shimmered with the soft glow of Christmas lights, their golden reflections dancing against the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Boston's winter skyline. Snow had begun to fall outside, blanketing the city in a quiet, ethereal white. Inside, the Walker family gathered around a towering 12-foot Christmas tree, its branches adorned with ornaments not of designer brands, but of deep sentimental value, glass figurines passed down from their grandmother, wooden carvings from childhood vacations, and delicate, handmade pieces that told stories of a time before wealth defined their existence. Rachel, standing near the fireplace, watched as Victoria studied one of the older ornaments, a small angel carved from olive wood. Her sister's expression was unreadable, thoughtful, almost nostalgic. Not enough gold, Vic? Rachel teased lightly. Victoria huffed but smirked. I was actually thinking, she murmured, turning the ornament in her hands, that maybe I went a little overboard last Christmas. Rachel raised a brow, leaning against the mantel. A little. Victoria rolled her eyes, but for once, her response wasn't defensive. Eleanor, sitting nearby on the sofa, took a slow sip of her hot cocoa and sighed. I still can't believe you deleted your Instagram, Victoria, she said, shaking her head. Victoria shrugged, dropping the ornament onto the branch and stepping back to admire her placement. You know, she said, when you spend your time working with kids who have nothing, showing off starts to feel a little stupid. Rachel's brows lifted in surprise, but she said nothing. Eleanor, however, nearly dropped her cocoa. Did you just say stupid? She asked, voice laced with genuine disbelief. Victoria smirked. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. The comment made Rachel laugh, a real genuine laugh, not one laced with the bitterness of old wounds. Across the room, Richard sat at the dining table, frowning at his laptop screen, his fingers drumming against the surface in deep concentration. This scholarship budget is impossible, he muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. I can't find a way to increase funding without cutting into operations. Rachel, stepping away from the fireplace, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Let me see, she said. Richard hesitated. For years, he had overlooked Rachel's abilities, dismissing her as the less successful daughter. But after everything, he finally saw her for who she was, a financial strategist who had quietly built an empire. So this time, he moved aside and let her take a look. Rachel scanned the screen, her mind already calculating. If we restructure the fund allocations and shift investments from short-term capital to long-term growth strategies, we can increase the scholarship amount by at least 15% without impacting overhead costs. Richard blinked. Then, he let out a low whistle. Well, he said, shaking his head, I guess I should have asked you a long time ago. Rachel smiled, but there was no resentment in it, only understanding. That's what family's for, right? She said lightly. Victoria, listening from across the room, tilted her head thoughtfully. Actually, she interjected, I had an idea too. Rachel and Richard turned to her. Victoria took a breath. I think we should combine the scholarship with my children's charity. A lot of the kids we work with have no access to higher education, and if we pool resources, we can expand the program significantly. Rachel's eyes flickered with genuine admiration. You want to be part of this? She asked, testing Victoria's sincerity. Victoria lifted her chin, but there was no arrogance in her stance anymore. Yes, she said simply. Rachel nodded slowly. Then let's do it. Eleanor, watching the exchange, dabbed her eyes discreetly with a napkin, overwhelmed by the quiet but undeniable transformation in her daughters. Actually, Richard added, I want my education foundation to join in too. If 3 organizations work together, we can create real, lasting impact. Rachel felt her throat tighten, the weight of the moment settling deep in her chest. A year ago, this family had been divided by status, by pride, by meaningless displays of wealth. Now they were building something together, not out of obligation, but out of shared purpose. She had never asked for their approval. She had never needed it. But now, for the first time, she had their respect. Eleanor raised her glass. To new beginnings, she said softly. Victoria lifted hers as well. And to Rachel she added, her voice clear, unwavering. The one who taught us what real value looks like. Rachel held her sister's gaze, searching for any trace of mockery. But there was none. Only sincerity. She lifted her own glass. To family, she said simply. The soft crackling of the fireplace filled the silence as their glasses clinked together, sealing a chapter they never thought they'd reach. Outside, snowflakes drifted in slow, lazy spirals, coating the city in a quiet kind of peace. And for the first time in a long time, Rachel Walker felt truly, undeniably at home. As the snow blanketed Boston in a quiet hush, the Walker family sat together, not as competitors in a race for status, but as a family finally bound by something real: understanding, respect, and love. Rachel had never sought to outshine her sister, nor had she ever wanted validation from her parents. What she wanted was for them to see that true value had nothing to do with luxury or social standing. It was found in the lives they touched, the kindness they shared, and the legacy they built together. This story is a reminder that wealth fades, but character remains. It is never too late to change, to see beyond material success, and to embrace what truly matters: family, integrity, and purpose. As the church bells rang in the distance, Rachel smiled, knowing that, for the first time, her family finally understood what real wealth looked like. If this story moved you, like this video to show your support. Comment 1, if you believe love is stronger than blood. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more gripping real-life stories that touch the heart.